Hello everybody, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, depending on where you're joining from, and welcome to Credera's Winter 26 Salesforce release highlights. I'm Keir Bowden, independent Salesforce specialist, and I'm your guest host for today. Once again, planning to show that guest host is the best host. Here's the agenda. I think it's pretty much our usual agenda, to be honest, not much changes there. So let's get to it. Starting as we always do with some fond farewells. All of the section images you'll see today were generated by ChatGPT 5. And as you can see, I've gone for film noir style this time. That works really well for things like saying goodbye. Less well for some other more technical concepts, as we'll see later. So unless you've been living under a rock, you will have heard about users being tricked into opening up their Salesforce data to hackers through a combination of voice phishing, a fake connected app, and the OAuth device flow. So as part of the response to this, Salesforce have disabled device flow for the default data loader connected app. So follow the details at the short link shown here to learn about how you now authenticate to data loader. Don't worry about capturing the short link at this moment. This will be shared with everybody who's joined the call, or everyone who's registered for the call, in fact. In a similar vein, the SOAP login method isn't available in the Winter 26 API, and earlier versions will be retired in summer 27, which is in around 16 months' time. So to continue using the SOAP API, you'll need to move to external apps and OAuth authentication. So this is a good thing, right? This avoids the use of stored passwords. It gives you much more granular access control in the form of OAuth scopes, and it allows individual app access to be easily revoked without affecting other applications and without shutting down the users. And it's also much easier to monitor and audit. So I would, although it's sticking around for another 16 months, I'd be looking to move across to this as soon as possible. It's much better to be aligned with modern security practices than legacy approaches tied to a user's password and profile. And again, you can find out more at the short link shown. What I would say is, speaking with my independent consultant hat on, so not for Credera, this is going to be quite a disruptive change, I think, for a number of organizations, especially those that haven't really done much with Salesforce recently and have a lot of integrations and maybe not a lot of developers. So I wouldn't be surprised if there was a little bit of leeway around the timing. But you should definitely not rely on that, because I do not work for Salesforce and I cannot speak for them. It's just my opinion. Moving on, Einstein Activity Capture Synced Calendar Overlay is going away in December. The idea of this was it showed read-only copies of events from Google or Microsoft calendars, as well as your calendar in Salesforce, but everybody thought that that just meant they had duplicate events, so they were deleting things. So it's out. It's a classic no good deed goes unpunished there. So it's on its way. In summer 26, so in June of next year, the Einstein Activity Capture Activity 360 reporting activity metrics and the activity analytics dashboard retire. Easy for me to say, right? Because starting in that release, in the summer 26 release, Einstein Activity Capture can store email data as task and email message records. So at that point, you can simply enable syncing of email as Salesforce activity for Einstein Activity Capture and report on it as you would any other Salesforce data. And Unified Knowledge is retiring in summer 26, just over 2 years after it was launched. Now, this might sound like a world record shortest lifespan for a feature, but actually this was built on a product called Zoomin, and Salesforce acquired that and announced their intention to integrate it with Data Cloud, and that's what's happened. So the route now is simply ingest your external knowledge content using Data Cloud connectors. Next up, we have some general changes that apply across the entire Salesforce application set. Starting with our old friend browser support, so not much changes here. As usual, it's the latest Edge Chromium, Chrome, Firefox, and Safari, aside from iPadOS, which is Safari only, and Classic Console, which is everything except Safari. There's a new setup domain rolling out. So if your organization restricts access to domains, if you've got any kind of firewall restrictions there, then make sure you allow list salesforce-setup.com. Similarly, IPv6 is coming at some point in time. So again, if your organization blocks addresses, you'll need to allow list these IPv6 ranges at some point in time. In this release, it's just the Salesforce Content Delivery Network for Experience Cloud sites, but Salesforce do plan to add support across the board. They're just not saying when. I would imagine they'll just follow recommendations of some steering group or other. And if you use features that rely on certificates, you're going to find yourself updating the certificates quite a bit more often in the future, as the maximum lifespan is dropping from 398 days down to 47 days, quite a significant decline there over the next 3.5 years. And there's a new license in town. The new unified employee license gives internal employees access to employee agents through Slack and Experience Cloud sites. So if that's something that's of interest to you, contact your account executive. There's a bunch of release updates coming in Winter 26. I won't read them all out. You can read them as well as I can. But these are, the top ones are enforced, so they're going to happen. So you need to make sure that you've tested those and automatically enabled. So those are going to come on, but then you can turn them off at least for a release or two. And here's the updates coming in the next release. So again, if you think these are likely to affect you, then make sure you test them out in a sandbox first before they're eventually forced upon you. Analytics next. The film noir style, not fantastic, but you can still make the case that ticker tapes were or ticker machines were an early form of reporting and analytics, I think. Starting with Tableau next. This was launched in the summer 25 release. So there's the last release, and as a reminder, is Tableau integrated with Data Cloud and Agentforce. You can now extend a semantic model from the Tableau Next workspace. You extend it and you can then modify it to your own specification, adding your own calculations, for example, but without impact to the underlying model. It also remains connected to the base model, so it's not like you're taking a copy which then atrophies as changes are made. You'll continue to receive any updates made to the base model. Marketplace dashboards allow you to get started quickly with out-of-the-box layout, so you can customize to fix your data. The widget color picker allows you to choose from standard and custom colors, as well as color palettes that can highlight data progress and status. And you can now add visualizations to dashboards directly from the visualization. Select the new Add to Dashboard button, and then search for the dashboard you want, or you can even create a new one at that point in time. You can add, I really like this, it's a minor change, but you can add reference lines in Lightning reports and dashboards. So you can show how the data compares to a benchmark, such as a target, a threshold, or average. I can see that being particularly useful in dashboards where you're trying to consume quite a lot of information quickly. So having those kind of reference points rather than trying to figure out what constitutes good and what constitutes less than good can be really helpful. And you can translate metadata labels to improve the localization of your reports and dashboards. So as shown here, this is things like the description, the report name, the dashboard name. So rather than having a label which always says in English, description or dashboard name, you can then translate that, so you can translate all aspects of the dashboard. So use the translation workbench, choose the type of metadata component you're interested in, and then pick the label to translate from the list. And finally, CRM analytics, feature parity with Lightning reports and dashboards, where you can now pick a single org-wide email address for subscriptions and notifications. And you can search for data columns by API name. So you have to click the Show Fields panel option from the drop-down menu, and then the Show Field API names from the little gear drop-down menu. Customization next. I think that actually worked really well for film noir style myself. List views can now, I really like this one, list views can now be sorted by multiple columns. So basically in the column sort dialog, you configure the columns that you want to include in the sort and the order that you want them to apply. So in this case, list view, it's contact name, then priority, then the date and time it was opened. and then the next time you view the list view, this will be reflected in the data that's shown. And also you can see the bit highlighted in orange towards the top left there. It also shows you how it's being ordered as a reminder. But as you can see, the contact name is the first thing to be sorted by, then the priority, and then the date and time was opened, which unfortunately is all the same on this one. So not the greatest example, but there you go. This configuration is saved until you modify or clear it, so it doesn't just go away of its own accord. Permissions and sharing next. When you remove permission sets or permission set groups from a user, related permission set licenses are removed automatically, which sounds great, but there are some caveats. So this is apart from updates made through user access policies. Obviously, if another permission set still requires the license, it won't be removed. Or if a permission set is removed from a group, so rather than actually removing that from the user, you're just removing some of the building blocks, it doesn't kind of follow the chain. The last one is a shame, because that's basically saying if you're removing 50 or more permission sets or permission set groups at once, and I say it's a shame because bulk changes of that nature are exactly when you want the platform doing some of the heavy lifting, not when you're just updating 1 or 2 records, but hey ho, maybe that will come in the future. When you make large-scale changes, the sharing calculations now run asynchronously. So this is for owner-based and account owner shares, and you can monitor how that's going via the setup and audit trail. You might already be seeing this as it started being applied on a rolling basis, starting with the last release, so it may already have hit your Salesforce instance. And if you have any restriction and scoping rules that reference multiple pick list values, that was a bit of a bug and you shouldn't have been able to do that. So you're now going to have to update those to reference a single value. Lightning App Builder now. You can configure custom pages for the flow default record pages for flows, orchestrations, orchestration runs, and orchestration versions. And there's also a new orchestration run details component that, to nobody's surprise, provides details of orchestration runs. And you can add this to a tab on the orchestration run record page. Another feature that I really like, field history tracking, now includes the data classification of all fields. And you can also, from the tabs across the top, you can click a particular classification and just see those fields. So that means you can focus on tracking the important fields from a compliance perspective, for example, rather than seeing hundreds and hundreds of fields that you're not really that worried about. Moving on to my favorite topic of development. Yeah, back in the days of electromechanical devices, this was how you programmed them. You just plugged things into each other. Lightning Web Components, Lightning Components first, or and Lightning Web Components. So Lightning Web Components can now be used for local actions in screen flows. So you can use that, for example, to display a confirmation toast or to automatically navigate to another page via LWC functionality. If you've never heard of the term boxcarring, then you can ignore this bit. But the performance of Aura applications has been improved in this release, and that's thanks to some changes in the way that requests are sent, combined and sent back to the server, which is known as boxcarring. So this is dynamic boxcar optimization, whatever that does. But it may change, the thing to be mindful of is it may change the order of execution for your callbacks, which might cause you a problem. And if it does, then you can disable the change. So if you've got Aura applications, you might want to give them a test in a sandbox. And Lightning App 2.0 is here. This is now the preferred way to embed Lightning Web Components into external applications not hosted on Salesforce. So this replaces Lightning Out Beta. So if you remember in the fond farewells, we had unified knowledge with maybe a record short lifespan. Well, Lightning Out Beta is the opposite, because I think that's been in beta for 8 years and has not gone generally available and has been replaced by something else. So farewell, old friend. Version 2 of the Salesforce Lightning Design System is generally available. So here's the version 1 form of an opportunity page, and here's the version 2 form of it. So these, you can see there's kind of rounded corners on buttons and pills and things. There's less kind of blue background, less background in general, slightly less space between components, again, rounded components. And also I've added in my own color scheme. I've added in a purple color scheme to align with my branding. So that's now generally available, and you can create themes to your heart's content. Flow and Apex tests are being combined to give a unified view of all tests in the system, which has also led to the renaming of the Apex test, whatever pages, so Apex test execution, as application test. So that became application test execution. Good thing, I think. You should be considering your tests holistically and in the round, rather than focused particularly on Apex or Flow. So when you run tests, if you run all tests, you generally speaking want to run everything, not just everything that's been written using a particular technology. As of this release, API version 65, access modifiers are required on abstract and override methods, and these must be protected, public or global, because you can't override a method and make it private because effectively it's not available. So again, that sounds like that might have been an issue with previous versions where you could just not supply those, and I guess it probably picked it up from how the class access modifier was defined. And you can now upload and download large binary files from external services as content documents rather than directly in Apex, which will help to avoid heap issues because you won't be limited by the 3 meg or 6 meg or 12 meg, depending on where you're running. This supports a file size of up to 16 meg in size, which is a bit of a struggle to deal with in Apex for sure. You can get insights into the metadata deployment sizes. The deployment status page now shows the number of files, and if you care about it, the total unzipped size of files that have been sent to Salesforce. You might think, why would you worry about that? Well, there is a limit on the total file size that can be sent to Salesforce, and those kind of things. There's a limit on the maximum number of components that can be sent in a single go. So while 3,000 and 5,500 bytes here would be absolutely nothing, it's a good way, if you feel you're getting close to that limit, it's a good way of identifying just how close you are. When making decisions based on complex or unstructured data, you can now leave it to AI to determine the conditions. So you simply describe the decision, define the outcomes, and let AI decide which outcome should execute based on the data that it gets passed. So no, this isn't for simple rules parsing around fields containing values and things like that. It's not a if email is undefined or if the first name is blank, something like that. This is more about AI where it can do a better job than rules parsing unstructured information. So often you end up with rules like, if you're looking for an email, what's the sentiment of this? Is the customer unhappy? You'd often end up with if body contains unhappy, angry, things like that. And that's quite a poor way of doing it. So this is good, the kind of thing AI is very good at distilling the sentiment out of a message or the intent or other kinds of meta information that you'd use in automation. So this is where you do this. So in this case, we've got, I need to categorize this email coming in from my customers based on intent. So trying to do that through simple rules is not going to be straightforward and is probably going to be quite error prone. However, note that this will consume Einstein requests. So if you're using it in an automated process where you get high levels of activity, you may be looking at a bit of a bill. So always test and measure in a sandbox to get an idea of what your production costs are going to be like. There's no longer any need to execute a get records action after creating a new record in a flow. You can now immediately reference the newly created record in subsequent actions. So getting a bit nearer to pro code development there, where you'd never create something and then have to go and retrieve it before you can do anything with it. You can now trigger a flow when a file gets attached to a record. And there's various ways you can do that. You can do that based on the file type or extension, the file name matching a pattern, or the values are created by field, for example. And also, if you're navigating via the keyboard, you now get some highlighting of the field that currently has focus. So it's not the bright orange one, unfortunately, because that would be really obvious. It's the blue border around annual revenue. So it's not really jumping out, but it is the others tend to be grey, and that's a darker blue. So it is giving you an idea of where you are if you are tabbing around the page, for example. You can now see how a screen appears to users in a flow screen appears to users in Lightning Experience or Experience Cloud sites through the preview style functionality. So you can see here the style has been chosen Cody Canyon, and that's got red buttons and a sans serif font, and then you can flip to another style. Maybe it's going to be used on another site. So this is Twilight Mauve. You can see this is much more serif-based text. It's a darker red. So you can kind of flip between them and make sure that it's going to look good across all your sites rather than just the one you're initially designing it in. Although note that this currently doesn't support Lightning Design System 2 themes, the ones that have literally just gone generally available, but I'm sure that will come at some point in the future. In screen flows, if you try and delete a field that is used in a data table, you'll receive an error. You should be familiar with this if you've ever tried to delete a field that's used in, I don't know, Apex or workflow rules or things like that. It's quite a common thing. So now it checks that metadata as well. And in the display text component, you can now apply heading and paragraph styles to text. Whereas previously you had to manually recreate that styling each time. And because we're human, we miss things. So that should ensure better consistency. If you have flows which may perform a call out, but not necessarily guaranteed every time, you can leave it up to the flow to decide if a new transaction is needed at runtime. So if a call out is needed and database actions are pending, then it has to enter a new transaction at that point to avoid holding up the database. If it doesn't have a call out, if it doesn't need a call out, then it won't start a new transaction. Previously, you could, you had to choose either start one or don't, whereas now you can leave it up to flow, which knows what's going on. And when adding an element to a flow, the new transform data mapping option allows you to transform the incoming data, but without leaving the element setup page. So literally from there, you just add source data elements, map those to corresponding target elements, and the transform data gets passed as an input to the element. The Flow Builder debug now appears as a resizable side panel along with your canvas, and you can also see the debugging inputs by clicking on the details tab. So again, continue with the whole Lightning Experience theme that's been the case since day one of trying to treat almost each page as a workspace rather than having to navigate around loads of different forms, etc. The debugger has been updated to display detailed run information about the flow, its actions and screens, and allow you to switch between the flow runtime and the canvas without leaving the debugger. And also to debug Lightning Web Component and all Aura local actions introduced in this release in the context of the screen flow. So you can see shown with a 1, you can see the marked with a 1 rather, you can see the details of an element even though you're still viewing the screen and the canvas. And you can also use the tabs marked with a 2 between screen and flow canvas to switch between those two items. You can compare flow versions in the automation app and see the changes made in an easy to consume format rather than having to look at 2 lots of XML and figure out what changed between them, or even seeing a set of XML changes and trying to figure out what those actually translate to. So you can see all the information about what changed there, and then if you click on view details, you'll then see more information about a specific change, what happened there. So you can see the label changed here, for example. And also for flows, there is a new report with a very snappy name, the Flow Run with Flow Element Run report. You would need to be logging flow metrics in Data Cloud for this, so you'd be consuming Data Cloud credits. But what it allows you to do is see a step-by-step trace of a specific flow execution. So kind of, I guess, a bit like the debug logs provide for Apex code when you enable those. And finally, for this section, some enhancements to flow approval processes. The debug mode in Flow Builder now supports approvals, so you can test before you deploy, always a good thing. If you give users the approval designer and view orchestration in automation app permissions, they can then manage auto-launched approval processes in the automation app. Users can also create flow approval processes and then submit them for activation so that someone with the manage flow permission can actually activate it for them. So you can spread around that creation of approval processes. The external change triggered approval process allows an approval process to be started from a change in an external application. Who knew? But yeah, it means that basically things can happen in a third-party system, and that can trickle down and kick off an approval process in Flow in Salesforce. And the resource assignee type simplifies the assigning a step to a text resource. So rather than having to either search for a user or a group or a Q API name, you just select the type of approver as a resource, and that text resource contains the name of the group, or sorry, the name of the user, the API name of the group, or the API name of the queue. So you don't have to look them up individually there. You can assign them earlier on in the flow. Experience Cloud next. Quite why somebody doing telephone support is filling in a form upside down, I don't know, but I'm sure ChatGPT had an idea about that. That's supposed to represent somebody getting support the old way of doing Experience Cloud. This won't take long. There's only a few changes in this release. Static resource images are now available in ScreenFlow display text components, which might not sound like much, but what that means is you can reuse the same images across sites rather than having to drop them into particular display text components and then remember which one you put in there, etc. If you have any references to legacy force.com site URLs, then you need to update those. By default, redirections are disabled in this release, and in the next release, they stop working entirely, so things will break if you're still relying on those. And in the last release, we got a 5 minutes to session timeout warning for Lightning Web Runtime sites. And this release, we get another timeout, but this one is at 30 seconds, so you get to remind the user rather than them getting distracted and going on to do something else. Marketing Cloud, the one again, I think that works quite well in the film noir style. There's a fair bit to cover here as part of the, I wouldn't say new Marketing Cloud Next. This is kind of an evolution of Marketing Cloud Growth, I think. So you got Marketing Cloud Next Growth and Marketing Cloud Next Advanced, I think it is. But essentially, this is Marketing Cloud Growth, but with agentic marketing added to it. So it's native to the platform, and you've got agents that are available to assist with campaign creation, lead optimization, and lead qualification and optimization. You might recall, if you've been to any of our previous webinars, that Growth was receiving quite a lot of updates to bring it up to speed with the other marketing offerings from Salesforce. And just because this is next, Marketing Cloud Next, that hasn't slowed down. There's still a bunch of changes in there. So let's whiz through those. So in-app messaging now supports push notification on verified devices, and also interactive notifications, including things like carousels. If you add mobile app messaging channels to campaigns, you can see aggregated metrics across all messages in the campaign. You can view metrics for message sends, deliveries, views, and interactions, and you can do that by message or across the entire campaign. You can use customizable flows to allow Agentforce to draft campaign briefs or create campaigns. And using the generate campaign insights action, you can extract insights from past campaigns that can inform future campaigns. And this is customizable, again, to allow you to focus on the metrics, extracting the insights that matter most to you. And you can speed up email creation with reusable content blocks, including banners, footers, terms and conditions, and any boilerplate content. Marketing Cloud Next now supports email templates. So templates are always a good thing because that allows you to standardize your messaging and also brand it. The content builder agent can draft and revise content, and also it can optimize content from the Salesforce CMS. And deliverability dashboard filters let you quickly visualize failure reasons for specific domains. So why couldn't we hit that domain with our messaging? Click rate and open rate metrics are now available for WhatsApp, and you can filter these by sender name. Interactive messaging for WhatsApp is now available, which allows recipients to execute flows, share their location, or click call to action buttons. Forms now support hidden fields and default values. So this is where you need to capture essential information about the campaign, but you don't want to force the user to re-enter, kind of information that's only of interest and specific to you. So you can do this via URL parameters, URL campaign or UTM campaign. Probably seen one of those if you've ever clicked on a link from an email into a newspaper or online newspaper, or you can do it via static default values, so pre-filled values that users can change if they need to. And form handlers allow you to receive captured data from forms hosted outside Salesforce, and landing pages can now be personalized with merge fields and also generated from predefined templates. And the final slide for Marketing Cloud next. You can now test features in a sandbox, although be aware this may consume credits for Data Cloud, messaging, and personalization. The default identity resolution rule set has a couple of new match rules. The lead to contact match rule avoids duplication when leads become contacts, and device to known matches, device to known matches web visitors to known profiles. If you are tracking visitor activity on your website, you'll need to update your web tracking connectors to get the latest functionality. And you can now segment your scoring based on different needs, products, regions, communications, etc., using multiple scoring models. And you can also manage costs by changing and slowing your scoring cadence. So previously, you only had a single scoring model to work with, which ran on a fixed cadence, regardless of whether you wanted to or not. And the Enhanced Insights dashboard. This now has new visualization for marketing performance. You can use this new chart to easily identify your top performing user segments and track activity trends over time, with the line chart now available across additional channels. So Marketing Cloud account engagement next. This was formerly known as Pardot to those of us who've been around for a little while. You can generate calculated insights and build segments in Data Cloud that include form handler engagement data. So you enable the account engagement connector in Data Cloud and then create a form handler engagement data stream if this is what you want to do. And with Data Cloud 1, you can create cross-org dynamic lists using Data Cloud segments from the primary Salesforce org, and then integrate this with dynamic lists across your companion orgs. Marketing Cloud engagement, formerly known as Marketing Cloud. As usual, this has its own deep dive release webinar from Salesforce, and that is scheduled for October the 30th. And the registration link is up already. So that's good. If you're interested in that, you can sign up for it. The release itself takes place between October the 3rd and November the 1st. Mobile next, and here's where the film noir style really fell down, I have to say. I can't remember seeing any 40s or 50s set films that had mobile devices that people could use, but hey ho, can't win them all. Another short section, the platform requirements are Android 11 and up, and iOS 17 and up, although Salesforce always mentioned these are subject to change without notice, so they could well be different by tomorrow. And users can log in without their username by entering their email address instead. So if they have a single Salesforce account associated with that email, they'll be asked to enter a password. If not, they'll be emailed a verification code and then asked to choose the domain, org, or username. Note this might sound a bit worrying, but it doesn't bypass authentication. It's just another way of allowing them to identify their user details. They'll still have to enter a password or complete single sign-on, etc. And also this only works in production. Moving on to Sales Cloud. Starting with the Agentforce Sales Development Representative, aka the SDR. So there are increased email limits if you're connected to a Microsoft Exchange email account, of 9,800 emails a day rather, versus the standard 1,800, so quite a significant increase. And you can also see if prospects are booking meetings through the SDR via a new counter in the control center, so you can see if it's actually working or if it's just something that emails people and they never come back. And you can now create up to 5 SDR agents, and each of those would have separate record assignment criteria, topic and actions. And finally, you can now use merge fields in sales email prompts. The new sales management Agentforce template includes pipeline management. And this is where the agent reviews recent calls, emails, and notes associated with an opportunity, and then suggests updates to fields like next step and stage. And you can configure the agent so that sellers have to review and approve the changes, or if you trust your agent, you can make it truly autonomous and configure it to make the updates. Sales Coach has some changes too. You can now preview and validate that it's all working as expected before activating the coaching configuration for users, which seems like quite a good idea. Essentially, you test in a realistic environment and you ensure the agent feedback is helpful before unleashing it on your sales team. There's also improved language support, allowing global teams to be coached in their preferred language, and they receive the feedback delivered in the language they've got configured in their user record. So not Agentforce, but continuing with the generative AI thing. Generative account research allows you to research and compile answers to key strategic questions with a single click, then automatically update account and account plan fields, which can save you time and can nurture customer relationships. And you can now use generative AI to create account, contact, lead, and opportunity summaries directly from the record using the Einstein summary component. Once you've got the summary, you can then dig into the details, ask further questions, or even open up Agentforce to continue the conversation. Forecasting granularity gets a boost with opportunity line item splits, with each line item's revenue rolling up to the forecasting period matching its service date. You can now align consumption forecasts with your custom fiscal year by configuring your forecast periods or quarters to match the fiscal year. So previously they were only available for the standard Gregorian calendar. And you can enable consumption forecasting, much like we saw in marketing with the lists. You can enable dynamic forecasting and companion orgs using Data Cloud 1. But to achieve this, you need to deploy the forecasting data kit on each companion org. Sales planning receives some AI support in this release. First off, you've got segmentation assistance using AI. So open the segment, click segment assist, and then choose an available action or enter a natural language request. Alignment formulas similarly get some AI love. Open the alignment, click formula assist, and again choose an action or enter your natural language request. And finally, for sales planning, works in a very similar way. Summarize territory optimizations with AI. So open an alignment, set focus, click summary, click start optimization, then specify preferences for balance and start the optimization. See what comes back. Some enhancements to email next. You need to identify users with unverified return email addresses, as an update enforced in this release that only users with verified addresses can send emails. These users would need to have been created before November the 1st, 2016. So the good news is you probably won't have many of them to worry about. But the easiest way to do this, to identify this, is to add the return address and verified return address return address fields to the user's list view and setup. And then order it by date, and you can by created date, and you can quickly see if you've got any to worry about. And when Einstein Activity Capture sync email as Salesforce activity is enabled, so we spoke about this at the beginning with the retirement of the Einstein Activity Capture 360 items, you can see email conversations organized into threads, either on the activity timeline or the email message record homepage in the email history tab. Einstein Activity Capture can automatically surface potential leads and contacts from email and event activity. So unmatched email addresses appear as possible new connections in the potential connections section of the email message record homepage, and you can choose to add that as a contact or an email. And finally, for Sales Cloud, update Einstein Activity Capture to the latest version now, and then come late November, you'll be able to migrate previously captured emails to Salesforce activity data. And finally, for our next generally available topic, Service Cloud. So Agentforce Service Assistance has some improvements. Firstly, there's similar case guidance. So semantic search powered by Data Cloud identifies related resolved cases in a service plan and shows them to the reps. I'd expect this user interface to improve a little, because I think it's fair to say that's pretty ordinary, just putting the detail, a couple of things about a case as a link that you can click on. So I'm sure that will improve. I think this is just an early version. And each step in a service plan created from knowledge articles will now cite its sources. Again, the user interface looks like it needs a little bit of attention to me, so I wouldn't be surprised to see that get better over the next release or two. Some changes to case management. Now when you disable web to case, you can choose to opt out of all email notifications from that point on. Agentforce employee agent can now close cases, saving reps the trouble of navigating to the record and updating it. They do still have to ask Agentforce to close it and specify the case number. So, how much time you're going to save is maybe slightly debatable with that. You can hide the public checkbox on case comments that community users are adding. And you probably want to do that because there's no way for them to create private comments, so it doesn't actually do anything. Their comments are always public. You can now generate reports based on a user's case team member role to get a better idea of their contributions and to understand their workloads. Einstein email prompt templates are now available in the email composer, allowing service reps to quickly create context-aware email responses, reducing case handling time and generally enhancing the customer experience. And finally, you can now use the case feed as grounding for AI case summaries, so a little bit of history of the case in there as well, which I think will be helpful. Entitlements and milestones next. The case list view can now include time to next milestone, which makes it obviously much easier to spot cases that are closer to breaching their SLA or overdue or maybe are currently paused. You can pause individual milestones when the situation is outside the service rep's control. You really don't want the SLA ticking over. There's nothing you can do about it, and it really is in the hands of a third party, for example. So this can be applied to work orders, incidents, problems, and change requests, and you have to enable it through the setup entitlement settings setup page. And there's a simplified setup experience for SLA management, where you can define rules to allow milestones to automatically complete, map entitlements to records using predefined rules, and create new milestone types while adding milestones. Next, some service channel changes, starting with email. There's a new inbound email, new inbound email limit for email to case, and that's 250 per case per rolling 24 hours. There was no limit previously, so that's definitely well, you could see an impact if you're hitting that. And emails that go over the limit simply fail. They do say if you would like to ask for this to be increased, then contact Salesforce support. But the way it's worded suggests to me they won't just roll over and do it. You might have to make a good business case in order to get that increased. Messaging channel now. The enhanced messaging setup has some improvements that allow you to manage all settings from the channel record homepage. You can also define auto response components and configure an inactivity timer for messaging sessions to release rep capacity, for example. And also you can adjust content settings, as I say, all from the channel record homepage. The WhatsApp flow format for form messaging components now supports images and up to 3 questions per page. And once you've submitted the flow to Meta, you'll be able to preview it. And using a flow and a notification messaging components, you can send customers automated messages in enhanced Facebook messaging channels to notify them, for example, about an upcoming delivery or a case update, for example. Previously, you could use the send a message action to start a conversation with a user on Facebook, but you couldn't send any templated notification messages. And for messages sent via the send conversation messages flow action, you can now troubleshoot failures using the new enhanced messaging log. So this shows details of automated outbound messages from enhanced messaging channels only, and you can drill into a message and diagnose why it failed. For example, reminders fail if the WhatsApp external template hasn't been approved yet. There's expanded file type support in enhanced chat. End users can send up to 900 different file types to reps, although sadly reps can only respond with 14 file types. And this is achieving feature parity in this area with legacy chat. And you can also customize the max file size. So if you don't want to have huge files, you can change that up to a hard limit of 5 meg, whereas previously it was always 5 meg was allowed and you got big files, whether you wanted them or not. Predictive quick text now presents pre-written suggested messages as they type, whereas previously they had to manually search for suggestions. And you can now message from the Salesforce mobile application from a tablet, whereas previously you had to use a smartphone. Routing next, you can now prioritize work additionally by the target start date to ensure you're meeting SLAs. So this is the accept by date metric it's referred to in a couple of places. So when prioritizing, it now considers routing priority, secondary priority, accept by date, and created date. And there's a new abandoned status for voice and enhanced chat work items, and you can view information about those abandoned items in standard reports and dashboards. And finally, for routing, you can now send outbound messages from Omni Mobile direct from the Omni inbox. The check rep availability for routing agent action allows Agentforce to check if anyone is there before escalating to a rep, quite helpful. And if no reps are available, it can provide an estimated wait time. And you can now search and sort from the omni-channel inbox. And you can see here that a rep has searched for lap and found a couple of messages regarding laptops. So that brings us to the end of the generally available content. So now we're moving on to look at a few of the beta features that are coming in this release. So remember, these features may never go GA, so always make purchasing decisions assuming they won't. The Sales Development Representative Analytics dashboard lets you assess agent effectiveness. Very useful thing to do. It's always good to know if your agents are actually helping or not. So you can see marked with a 1, you can filter by activation date, status, and outcome. Marked with a 2, you can toggle between the overview and agent effectiveness tabs, depending on whether you want a high level or a detailed view. The drop-down menu marked with a 3 allows you to see more details, such as associated metrics, sharing the chart to Slack, or modifying the metric. And in the chart marked with a 4, you can view details for engaged leads, non-engaged leads, and opportunities. The Einstein Next Generation Flow Creation breaks down your business requirements and gives generative AI specific directions to complete individual tasks. So if you're basically creating with Einstein, you should get better outcomes from this. But also note, as this is generative AI, it will consume Einstein request credits. This is nice, I think. Nested loops in Flow allow traversal of all levels of records in a data graph. So in this example here, get records has retrieved an account, the account's contacts, and each contact's cases. So the first loop is through the contacts related list on the account, while the second loop is on related records from the current item in the first loop. So previously, you could only traverse a single level of related records. This does rely on the also add related records beta feature that we covered in the Summer 25 release webinar, the last release. So it does only work on auto-launched flows. And after years of working in the land of the midnight sun, dark mode is finally coming to Salesforce. So you would specify this in the advanced settings for an SLDS theme, and then users can choose dark light or matching the selection on their computer. I couldn't show you a screenshot of this because it's still not appearing in my pre-release org, and I couldn't find any decent screenshots to show that were actually of Salesforce rather than mock-ups, etc. But always good to see something like dark mode coming. Note that this is Salesforce Lightning Design System 2 themes only. It doesn't apply to setup pages, and not everything will support this. So if you're going to roll this out to your users and there's some applications that you particularly want in dark mode, then test it out in a sandbox first and make sure it's giving you what you want. And that brings us to the end of the new features. So this has been a look at the new items that we think are of most interest to Credera's customers and prospects, but obviously it's not exhaustive. 700 odd pages of release notes would be quite a lot to go through in less than an hour. So here's the resources to find out about the rest of it. Okay, time to see if we've got any questions. And again, I do think this works quite well as a film noir style image. Let us see what we've got. Oh my word. In your article, Agents Augment Automation and Testing Agentforce Deterministic versus Probabilistic, you mentioned the fact that artificial intelligence changes how we must think about testing as applications involving AI probabilistic. Beyond adapting UAT exit criteria, besides leveraging the Agentforce Testing Center, is there any Salesforce feature you recommend we use when testing an Agentforce agent to cater for its unpredictable and creative forte? Not really. I think it's more of a mindset thing. And I don't think this is like 100% new, because if you think about testing something like a curable, you can't actually execute a curable in genuine asynchronous mode in a test. What you have to do is you basically execute it, and then you look at the outcomes and say, are those the outcomes I was expecting? So I think that's the kind of thing that you have to do with Agentforce. It's much more about mindset, and we're thinking about, what did I expect to happen? Does this outcome look like things I would expect to happen? Doesn't necessarily, the kind of creative aspect comes down to, it doesn't necessarily have to match exactly. It's, is this reasonable? I think where it gets a bit more tricky is trying to do automated testing. So I think at the moment you still need that human interaction of saying, does this look reasonable? Question 2, what are your thoughts on Agentforce 3 scaling AI agents? Still fledgling concept, will not get any momentum, too big a thing to be a big thing for Dreamforce 2025. I think that's exactly the final point. I think Dreamforce 2025, we're going to hear a lot about that. I think if you, without wishing to diss Salesforce, if you look at this release, while there's a load of changes, I think they're all relatively small. They've not been huge amounts of effort required to make those changes. They've been meaningful, they've been impactful, but they've not necessarily consumed an awful lot of time and effort. And that's because I think most of that time and effort is going into Agentforce. And the Agentforce changes we've seen in this release have been, minor tweaks to things like the SDR, the sales code. So I think there's big things coming in Dreamforce, and we've only got 2 weeks to wait, which will be awesome. So yeah, I definitely, I think, make sure you're not going to Dreamforce, make sure to watch the Dreamforce keynote. I think there's big stuff coming. I wouldn't be surprised if it was called Agentforce X or something like that as well, because Mark Benioff tends to lose interest in consistent naming after not too long. With the Marketing Cloud next email template changes, do you see a unified and metadata-friendly email template feature across Salesforce maybe on the horizon? I'd have to be honest and say that I don't. I can see that across the marketing application. I just think that Salesforce seemed to me to operate as a number of independent teams. So I would think that it would have to be a priority for all of those teams to come together, and I'm not sure that's going to be the case for a while. If you go back to things like when we had the feature at the top of Lightning pages where you could see your opportunity stages, etc., and stages for records. I think at one point in time there were 4 different versions of that. They eventually got brought into one just because it was proving to be really painful for very, very similar things. But I think that was still relatively related teams. I think the teams are quite disparate. So personally, I don't see it happening. But again, I'm not Salesforce, so I could be wrong. Do we know if dark mode is still in starter edition only in winter 26? I do not know if that is starter edition only I don't remember seeing anything about that. Just bear with me 1 second. No, you're absolutely right. Yeah, Lightning Edition, it applies to the Salesforce Lightning Design System 2 and Lightning Experience in Starter. Yeah, I missed that when I was going through the release notes. Good catch. That explains why it's not in my pre-release org as well, so I couldn't show it.